Well, good morning, everybody. Coming today. So before we begin with the real presentation, I just wanted to go over the changes in the law, which will be effective January 1st. So we're aware of the NAR settlement, which requires us to have a representation agreement, but the law itself is slightly different than what the settlement consists of. So right now, Assembly Bill 2992 requires the biggest difference actually is that before you submit an offer, you're required to have a representation agreement. Whereas the settlement requires us to have a representation agreement with a buyer before we even show a property. So that's a dramatic departure from what we're required to follow. Now, if you show a property and you don't have a representation agreement, you're not violating the licensing laws. That's my interpretation of what's going on. However, you could be subject to a $2,500 fine. So that's an issue, also an ethics violation. But you're not necessarily violating the law. But if you submit an offer without a representation agreement, it's much more than just a fine. It is now a licensing law violation as of January 1st of 2025. So the implications are much more severe, as a matter of fact. So it's very similar. So you must have a representation agreement before you submit an offer, whereas the settlement agreement indicates that we must have a representation agreement even before we show a property. So that is a big deviation from one to the other. And the law doesn't really differentiate in regards to the compensation. It must be stipulated. If you have a representation agreement and the compensation is not specific, then that representation agreement is not going to be enforceable, and you're probably in violation of the law, so keep that in mind. And then it should mention the services you're rendering, when the compensation is due, and also that the duration of the compensation agreement cannot exceed 90 days, and nor can it automatically renew. And none of the forms that have been released to us have an automatic renewal, but don't get clever and start including something like that. You're entitled to extend the representation agreement. That is not a violation. And there's no limitation for what I consider regards to how far you extend a representation agreement. So those are really the only major differences, as a matter of fact, but now it's going to be not just a fine or a violation or an ethics violation. It's going to, if you breach the law, it's a licensing law violation. And that means you could be defending yourself against a claim against you made by the Department of Real Estate. An accusation is the term that they use, which means they're taking you to court. That's really what's taking place, and very well could impose fines, could be a licensure, it could be a rescission of your license, it could be temporarily suspending your license. You're going to ask something?
Yeah, did you say there was no limit to the extension?
Not the number, no, the number of extensions.
Oh,
the
okay,
extension
okay,
can't
okay.
exceed 3 months, so I should have clarified that. So yes, Monsieur?
I believe there is one section in the buyer representation agreement that says, after the representation expired, I am, kind of the contract goes on, let's say for 90 days, 120 days, whatever. After the the representation expired, I just signed something like a representation agreement, and I put like after the expiration, 90 days extension, which was its section of the representation.
That's not any offers.
Well, that's the analogy is the listing, a traditional listing contract. That's a protection clause for any properties that you had introduced. Right, exactly.
So there's no time limit on that one. It's just.
But
no, well, you're going to say something?
yeah, you got to make sure that you have the BIPP, the broker involvement of procuring property form, submitted to that client after either cancellation or expiration within 5 days or less of that contract being expired or canceled, in order to entitle you to that compensation that you were involved with.
So that form, you would then list the properties in which you had some type of involvement. So remember, if it's a non-exclusive agreement, you have certain tasks that you must complete. Non-exclusive, you're entitled to compensation no matter what, but you at least need to show the address of the properties.
That you've either shown or written offers on.
At the cancellation, that's it.
Yeah, after
Or-
the
or
expiration, for
after
example, or after, right, cancellation or expiration. So there's a difference there. But yeah, non-exclusive, not only would you have to provide a list of the properties that you had shown, but then you would actually have to show evidence that you perform certain tasks to entitle you to commission.
Okay.
Whereas non-exclusive, exclusive,
Yeah.
if you just list a property, you would be entitled to compensation for that duration of time following the termination or expiration of the buyer representation agreement.
Thank you.
which that's fun.
Yeah, good question. And so any questions about that? I think we beat that whole subject to death as a matter of fact, so it's very similar. Now, our next speaker, Anthony Bried, he is a Zipform certified trainer, Paperless Pro Certified, RPR Certified Trainer, ePro Senior Technology Trainer, and he has been with Orange County Realtors for a number of years and a great friend. Tony, thank you for
sir.
coming today. So I asked Tony to go over e-signing. Now, there are changes that are taking place to the residential purchase contract coming once again January 1st. But we have a lot of questions that occur associated with electronic signing. If we have an entity, let's assume with that entity, we have 2, 3, or 4 signers that are required. So there's complications when using e-signing. So that's something that I asked him to address. And then what was the other thing we talked about?
The on the lease side, if you accidentally made a listing for sale transaction, but you were meant it for the lease, a lease listing transaction that the housing provider, landlord had issues filling out some of the forms because of their role dictated by that transaction. So we'll kind of go over that today to make sure that you all are making the correct transactions
Okay.
in that regard.
But if there's issues or questions that you have in regards to when having documents signed electronically, especially when there's entities involved, multiple clients, for example, there could be 4, 5, 6 signers required. The additional signature addendum should automatically be added. But then the other question that comes, and I just want to confirm this with you, when you have the additional signature addendum, and there are 5 people that are signing that document, not the original 2 on the purchase contract, let's use that as an example. Those additional 5 people don't have to go back and initial every preceding document. So that's the purpose of the additional signature addendum. From my perspective, it doesn't seem like the right approach, but that's exactly how the system or document is designed. So with that, Tony, please take it.
Thank you.
I hear Rich from agents that other agents on the other side of the transaction, they ask for your clients to do that. So even though it's not required, they say, well, we need this done like this, or escrow companies.
Well, then you have a choice. You can just do it,
Yeah.
or you can say, hey, it's not required, right? So let's come up with a reason why we don't have to go through that exercise.
Short of the form says it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, good morning, everybody. Happy Thanksgiving, because I know next week Thanksgiving is here. For those of you who don't know me, a quick introduction. My name is Anthony. I work at Orange County Realtors, been there 22 years. I'm your technology trainer. Carlos and Rich have me out here at least once a month to go over all your tools and products and your training on how to use MLS, how to use Zipforms, and of course, I love training on tech. So hopefully you all are experiencing some really great things. Yes? Okay.
Yes.
There we go. Coffee hasn't kicked in yet. All right.
That was a layup. Come on.
Now, real quickly, CAR is updating their forms. I just got an email from CAR late yesterday afternoon. December 16th, the new forms are going to be released in Zipforms. Thankfully, only 5 brand new forms instead of 35 are being brought out. So you only got 5 new ones, but 55 contracts are being updated and changed and modified. The RPA, the RL, the LL, the LRA, things like that you want to go through. Now, just real quickly, just so we are proactive. I want everybody to at least get to preview what these drafts look like. They are changing day to day, all the way up to the last minute of the release, as they do. So the way you can find those things real quickly before we jump in our class is at car.org. If you go to car.org and you move your mouse over to the transaction center, and I'm going to minimize my camera here. From here, what I'm now going to do, I'm just going to hide that. Boom. There we go. You're gonna move your mouse over towards the right-hand side where it says standard forms. When you click on standard forms, you may be required to log into your account, which is easy, like you would with Zipforms. But from here, what you're now going to do with your choices is you're going to select form revisions and new form releases. From here, you're going to see the new December 2024 forms draft and quick summary of forms. Now, what we got here are the 5 new forms, a CAC, an ECC B, an ECCS, an IDA, an RPOI, all these fun things that we just don't know the new acronyms for. Plus, here's a list of all the contracts being modified. All we got to do is just simply click on either of the 2 lists. Rebs will open up and we can now preview a draft copy of these forms. Now, what's nice about this, and we see here that the BRBC is being updated. If we click on that, the form will open up and everything in red on the form. And I'll just shrink that by 50%. Everything in red on this form is what's being changed. So we can see a lot of interesting changes. Now, what I like about something like this, print it out, preview it, sit down with Rich, come up with a strategy. So that way, when December 16th comes about, both you and Rich know how to go over the forms with a client. Know what you need to now negotiate and put on the form. One good news is that even though there are 5 new contracts, one does go away, and that is the SPBB, the seller payment of buyer broker form, which usually accompanied the RPA contract. And what they've done with that is that they've merged that form into section 3G3 of the RPA. So the SPP has gone away and they've now made a brand new section, which they've also made a brand new section of the contract, which has increased your page from 16 to 17 pages. But here we've got all this fun stuff here that right up front, the seller agrees to pay, and it indicates the buyer affirmatively represents that at the time of this offer is being made, the buyer has a written agreement with the buyer broker that A, is valid, covers the property, and 3, provides the compensation for no less than what is on that buyer broker agreement. So now all that language is right up front. It's written into the offer. It can be made, so it's a little bit easier for you all. Anybody like that?
It's great.
By the way, some other nice sections here real quickly, and we were talking about this earlier about the entities. And let me get down to that section, hopefully. A lot of pages, I know. They've actually added in sections for the offers from the entity buyer side as well as the seller side entities. So they've now added in all this necessary fun legal language for the 2 entities on both the seller side and the buyer side, which is kind of nice. Now you don't have to necessarily need an RCFP, either -B or -S, to get this form signed by the entity. It does outline some of the officers here or the persons that are legally authorized to sign. You can put their names in. So again, this is a great form to print out, start to look at, so that way when it's newly released, you're not caught off guard. Anybody like that?
Yes.
Good. All right, so now let's get into the nitty-gritty. What do we do when there's a time and place when either we're making an offer or taking a listing when we have multiple signers? So maybe we open up the purchase agreement here. And under the new platform, which is going to be super easy for us, we're in the purchase agreement. And we're going to first start off with the parties. We're going to add in all 4 parties, buyer 1, buyer 2, buyer 3, buyer 4, as an example. We got Tom, we got Stephanie, we got their children, Tommy Jr. and their daughter, Susie, on as buyers of a property. Because nowadays we're talking about multi-generational. Yes,
Can
sir.
you show us where you add those parties in?
Sure.
Just show them there, please. Thank you.
To add a party in, simply go over under the party section over here to the right, click on add, add a new party. From here, you can now select their role, and you will have roles buyers 1 through 4. If you have, say, buyers 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, as an example, just add them in as add other, and then what that role is. Buyer 5, buyer 6, buyer 7, buyer 8.
So we go back to the dashboard, there are boxes also for the parties. So sometimes that might be, if that's what I remember correctly, confusing.
Are you talking about-
Here.
It does the same thing.
Yeah,
It does the same
Yeah.
thing. Are you
So
talking
it's-
about here at this section where we're looking at this and we
Yeah,
go to the
top
party
right.
section here?
Yes, exactly.
Yep, we
So
can.
is it preferred to go to the screen that you were just showing to add the parties, do you think? Is it easier?
I think it's easier just because you can add things in and you'll see it actually add to the contract right then and there. Here, I can fill all them in if I wanted to, but then when I add contracts, it'll still work the same way. So it's just personal preference at that point. So I personally like to be in a contract because I know 9 times out of 10, you're in the middle of editing a contract. You want to write the terms. Carlos, his wife, his kids want to buy a property. It's hot. The market's hot. They want to make an offer right away. I'm usually jumping right into the forms versus jumping into the parties first, which is why here in this new forms editor, even though I've grabbed the form, I can immediately go back up to the top and do the same thing here. So just simply add your parties. Now you'll notice that on the contract, however, we only have sections 1 and 2 for buyers 1 and 2. So what about 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8? Where are they going to be going? Well, this is where we need to make sure that we add a form into the contract called the Additional Signature Addendum, the ASA. The ASA basically indicates that you're working with the purchase agreement, you're buying the property, that you've got buyers 1 and 2, but by signing below section 3, you can now indicate who the additional buyers are. So in this case, if I were to select under additional signers, the printed name, I click on the down arrow, you'll see here that it immediately jumps to buyer Tom Buyer and Stephanie Buyer. So it's after, and then we come down below to the next printed name. And that's funny, Tom or Stephanie. So it's going to add all these necessary people into this agreement. And you'll notice here that it says, if this document is identified above with the liquidated damages and arbitration clause has been initialed by one or more of the parties, they either agree or do not agree to the liquidated damages and disputes and resolutions. But ultimately, as they're signing this form basically says that they're signing this in lieu of and agree to the terms of the attached documents.
Aren't those the original 2 buyers?
Oh, actually it is. That's
So
funny.
you can type in, yeah, you can type in.
You're right, it does. So I could type in Stephanie and Tommy. I don't know why it didn't give me Tommy.
There's some forms that don't automatically show you all the parties.
Right. Let's see. Tommy Buyer, or yeah. Tommy Buyer Jr. And then I think I had Susie. Susie Q, Buyer 4. So I have their names printed here, so now we can apply their sections to this form. Now, when it comes to digital signing, when we go to sign the documents. And we go through these steps. From here, when I go to add the participants from the transaction, I now pick my clients. Buyer 2, buyer 4, buyer 1, buyer 3, and of course myself. When I hit select, everything now becomes color coded. Now here we'll notice that, and we'll just rearrange this here in just a second. We've got buyer 1 and buyer 2 on the contract. Now we could go down to the tools section and drag over buyer 3, buyer 4 if we wanted to, but know that this form is already going to be signed by the first 2 buyers. They don't have to be signed by the other buyers. What we want to do, however, is that when we go down to the ASA form, we can now go to the tools section, and for buyer 3 and 4, grab over their signatures and initials and add them in here. So now they can sign this form. Because this form is accompanying the other form, they can now just make sure or indicate by this signature and or initial that they've read through the entire form, which is vital for us as agents to make sure that each and every client goes through all the forms. Because when they start digitally signing, it will only take them immediately to their signature areas without reading anything. So I want them to preview it first before starting to sign. Does that make sense? Does that look hard? All right. Any questions on multiple signers? Now, by the way, you can have multiple ASAs. So if you have, heaven forbid, 12 other people, right, part of an entity, you can add in as many ASAs with at least 3 names per ASA. So I think there's, what is it, 4 ASAs at 3 names each. That gives you 12 extra spots on top of the 2 people on the contract itself.
And if these were trustees to a trust, then you would add the title to it to the right, right?
I would probably add the title, Tommy Buyer Trustee to the right. However, that needs to appear for the other trustee entities. Heaven forbid you have that many people signing a trust.
It's happened.
It has
It
happened.
has happened. But if you would just go over section 2 once again, just explain it, because if an escrow officer questions you, section 2 addresses the fact that you don't have to have them go back and initial every single page. It's
Right.
acknowledging that they're agreeing to all the terms of the preceding documents mentioned above.
Yeah, so read section 2, and by the way, it's highlighted in bold, so it stands out to you and the clients. So by signing below, the undersigned acknowledges receipt of the document identified above and except as specified below, agrees to the terms and conditions, representations and disclosures in the document. So as they're signing, they're also agreeing or not agreeing to liquidated damages and arbitration. So we gotta make sure that everybody's on board with one or both of those optional terms. Which, does everybody like that?
Yeah,
Good.
yeah, it simplifies it.
Now, let's make it a little bit easier. Say we have to have the printed name of the trust on a form. Well, we could do that too and assign a signing representative to that trust. Now, we can't assign everybody to that one trust, but we can at least assign the main person for that trust or LLC. How we do that? And I'll go back into a different transaction real quick. Under our parties. And let's see here, let's change the party. Say we have the trust. So we want the Moore Family Trust. Right? Now typically, and actually let's just cancel that. Yes, cancel.
Listing side.
I actually want to remove it. Yes, remove. And we'll just remove this person as well. And we'll just start from scratch. So we want to add a party. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put in the Moore Family Trust. Now, as we know here, the trusts typically don't have an email address, right? So, or an LLC doesn't have an email address, but we have the signing representative. Now, in the past, what you all used to do was you would put the trust name on the contract Then when it came to digital signing, you would take out the trust name and put in the trustee's name, and you had to do that each and every time you went for digital signatures. You don't have to do that anymore. If you continue to scroll down through the parties list here, there is a choice that says signing representative. Now all I need to do is put in the trustee name. Richard Moore, trustee. Now Richard does have an email address, so now I can put in his email address in this case. And now when I save, we'll see here the Moore Family Trust is the printed name. But then when I go to digitally sign this document, the system like Authentisign will automatically replace the trust name with the trustee's name
For the signature.
for the signature portion. So then it will say here in this case, because when we select the signers, you'll notice that it says Richard trustee, right? When I hit select, now it'll say Richard Moore trustee with the initials RMT signing for the Moore Family Trust. And you'll notice here that those sections will be automatically pre-placed. Now, if I had more than one trustee, I would add them in as individual buyers or sellers or individual people and just add the last name as trustee if it can fit.
But you wouldn't put the trust name, you would leave that blank, right? Instead of retyping the trust
I
name.
only need the trust name in the first section, but if the other people's names need to be on the contracts, then you would put them in as separate signers.
But with no name.
Yeah, you wouldn't have to go, the Moore Family Trust, the Moore Family Trust, the Moore
Right.
Family Trust. No, you don't have to do that.
We're going to have to put like the trustee as a last name when you sign it,
Yes,
but we cannot just put a last name as last
it
name.
depends on the situation. I think, can you get away without saying trustee?
If you have the
Well, if the
RCSD,
purchase contract is
Right.
used and they acknowledge who the entity is, then an RCSD is not required and they can sign just in the capacity of their individual name. Which
Okay,
acts
So it
as the
should be
trustee.
fine.
that should be fine
I put their
then.
last name.
So it sounds
If
like,
the
I mean,
RPA is completed properly. If it's not, then you need an RCSD.
right. So if you've got at least the first person signing for that trust, they provide the proof, but yet you've got everybody else. And again, that proof that is given, what is it, 3 days after
It is after acceptance.
acceptance to say, these are the people that are allowed to sign for this trust or limited liability corporation, then you're okay.
There's a multiple trustee, so there's an option, so you can put multiple people name on it, right?
No,
No?
it would be one person at a time.
Yes.
So they would be individual
So you have
parties.
to Put like let's say 4 trustees, then do. 4
So then-
trustees Again,
So then what you would do is you would add them as individual parties. So back at that party section, even though we've got the printed name of the trust on the form, now what I would do is I would add in the other parties as individual parties. So buyer 2 would be trustee number 2, buyer 3 would be trustee number 3, buyer 4 would be trustee number 4. Add other, buyer 5 trustee, buyer 6 trustee, which again, now all of a sudden I'm using an ASA for all those individual trustees. But what's nice is those people beyond 2 are now signing the ASA, which is acknowledging this form. And by the way, you have to have an ASA in that case on every other contract signing. So like a repair request, signing of disclosures, right? Because it shows proof that they have signed or at least read and acknowledged those other forms attached with it.
So the choice, ASA, or you can just manually insert signature blocks in all those documents.
Right, you can manually
That's another way. around
Which
it.
gets really tight really quick.
It is, but now, that's a good point that you brought up, that you would need an ASA for any other document
That's,
thereafter.
yeah,
but
you
most
can't
of
just
them-
take the one and say that it's a
Assume
blanket.
Good for everything that occurs thereafter.
Most of
Correct.
the forms are referenced, they reference the RPA though, right? So they're all addendums to the RPA, most of them.
most of them are.
Most of them, but if I get seller's disclosures,
Yeah.
where now my buyers who are buying in this entity and I've got 15 or
Yeah.
12
You need a new one for,
I've got to do an ASA for
Because
each and
additional
every
Signature addendum refers to the document that they're.
right,
sign.
that you're
So
signing.
now I would list all those disclosures in that
oh
document.
geez.
That's the
right?
easy way to do it, though.
It is a
List all
super
of them.
easy way, yeah.
Easier way.
Hey, Tony,
Yes, sir.
so you have a client, you've got to trust, husband and wife, either one can sign, doesn't make any difference. Right, they're both can sign.
I don't know,
Well, that's if the trust gives the authority, then he's making the assumption.
right,
Yeah, let's say it does.
okay,
My one, the husband signs it, and then now the escrow, the wife wants to sign the escrow paper. So the escrow officer made me go back and put her name on all these things. I said she doesn't need to because and either one can sign. She said, well, since your
well,
wife-
she's got it, did she get a chance to review the documents?
Oh, yeah. That was our problem. But she wants now to sign on the escrow docs, not really, she didn't care about the contract. The escrow officer is making her, put her back on.
There's a reason why, would that be, Richard?
Well,
It's not a party to
oversight
the
is never a
contract.
problem, but for someone to make that demand when it's not required, Steve, I would completely disagree with what the escrow officer is attempting to do. They're giving legal advice in that regard, saying who must sign.
Right,
And that's what I told her, in those same words, basically, and then she doesn't need to, but then she said she wouldn't, otherwise she wouldn't comply. So I said, I didn't want to fight, right? So I added her to it. But now going forward on the disclosures, I don't need her to sign disclosures.
Not if the trust indicates that one or the other party needs signed, it doesn't require the trustee signatures of all trustees.
No,
Yeah.
All right, very good then.
yeah, because usually
Confirm that.
trusts are very clear about who's allowed to sign for it or not. And which is why it's important that anybody having a trust should always keep up with it, like heaven forbid, one of the trustees, when it needs two signatures, passes away, how does that, and it should be defined in the trust anyway.
Should, so let's assume they can't understand the trust, then you can have a trust certification signed on the trust certification. It will list all the names of the trustees and successor trustees, but it will also indicate only whose signature is required to act on behalf of the trust.
Okay,
So that's another way to get around it, because if the trustees sign and one says, they all agree that only one trustee is required to sign to act on behalf of the trust, that should satisfy all the requirements. It will.
Very good. Yeah,
There you go.
That's helpful.
I love the wealth of knowledge. So yeah, I mean, that's great that you're getting that advice. All right, but yeah, you could do that with the people. Now, when it comes, by the way, are there any questions on assigning a trustee or an LLC and multiple people?
Anybody? How's your chance?
Going once, going twice? All right. So now what do we need to do for our transactions? When we make a transaction, we have to be really, really careful of the transactions that we're making, because it does limit us into what we can and cannot do, and it limits what our parties can and cannot do. So this is why when we make a new transaction, the system always asks us, what type of transaction are we going to make? Are we creating a new listing for sale? Are we creating a new offer for buying a property for sale? Are we creating a new lease for a tenant? Or are we creating a new lease listing for a housing provider? Or what they now say is real
Rental
estate
property owner.
owned, oh yeah,
Rental property owner.
rental property owner, the RPO. Gotta love all these crazy
Yeah,
acronyms.
right, exactly.
Rental property owner. So if it's a case where I'm representing the rental property owner, the RPO, I'm going to need to make sure that I choose new lease listing. Because even though I can change, I can make a transaction, I can't change the transaction type in my Zipforms.
Can,
Right.
The transaction type you
Yeah.
can change?
I just found out this morning you can.
Oh. Let's see.
Yes,
Change the-
transaction details. And then you can change it there.
Oh, no, this
like-
doesn't,
Yeah, on the left, lease, transaction type, listing, purchase, lease.
oh, okay, there it is. Yeah, you're right. That wasn't there before. Okay, so now I just learned something new. So you could change it here, but I would say why put yourself through that?
'Cause
Make it
still
right
might
the
not
first
work.
time.
Yeah.
Cause I didn't notice that was there ever. So you name it, right? And then we put in the address, 123 Main, Irvine, California, 92618. It's a residential. And we save it. Okay. So now what this does, I love the fact that, do you want to screen yes or no? By the way, this is important. Rent spree. Rent spree, for those of you who are listing a property for rent, is an also CAR member benefit. It's not just a CRMLS benefit, but it's also a CAR benefit. What's nice about this is that when you say yes, in this case, then the system will automatically generate a link that you can share to the public for them to submit an online application. Now, what I would want you all to do is to make sure that your rent-spree accounts are set up. So go to rentspree.com, sign up for your account as a CAR member or a CRMLS member. That way you can use the CAR contracts for the application to rent.
You have to link the account.
You would have to link the account. But at least when you say yes, it'll say, oh, your accounts are linked or not linked. You can also do that under the profile settings to link your account as well. And what's nice about that is that I would say it's also well worth paying or having the client pay $50 versus $35 for the rent, for the screening fee. Because number one, for the extra fee, they can actually upload extra documents like disclosures, past referrals for their renter, so they can actually upload documents. And if they do want to submit an application to another person's property, this will allow them to submit another application to another listing. Okay, but it also, you can set it up whereby the seller or the rental property owner actually gets a copy of the report instead of you. So you can fully remove yourself from getting those reports. Because at that point, why should you look at someone's social security and credit report and conviction report and eviction reports?
You need it for the checklist.
I don't think it gives social security number.
Does it?
It doesn't have it anymore?
But it's because we need it for the checklist. That's why we need it.
I thought they actually allow the tenant to put in their social security. Maybe you don't see the full one anymore, but you used to. The last time I used it, when I was able to use it, I got to see everybody's social security, everything. So if they've taken that away, great.
Yeah, the dilemma is sometimes rental property owners want social security number. So if you're listing a property for lease and the rental property owner gets the rent-free application, if they want the social security number, you may have the tenant or the prospective tenant complete the rent screening application found within Zipforms, because that will then provide the social security number.
Yeah. Which, when you set up your account, just say, I want to merge my Zipforms account with rent spree. Now you'll have access to the CAR forms, which is good.
Can you show us how to link it?
Yeah.
Where you?
I don't have access to it because I'm not a realtor.
No, but there's a section where you can go to link it though, right?
I don't have an account with rent spree because I'm not a realtor.
Right, but do you link it from Zipforms to RentSpree, or do you link it from RentSpree to Zipforms?
Either one will ask you. So let's see here. Rentspree.com.
But there's a section in Zipforms where it shows you.
Yes. So let's go there. So if I go to the top and I go to my profile and settings, and then I go to my settings, I think it's here. Integrations, moving, earnest, insurance. Let's see, link my other Zipform accounts. Let's see. Was here, let's see, products. Let's see, digital. It might be under products where you might see rent spree here as an available product.
It might be like on the dashboard or something on that.
Yeah, it might be on, not this dashboard, but the partners. Under partners, you can come down below and find all these
Rent spree.
rent spree.
Yep.
when I click on, see how it doesn't give me a chance to link the account
Right.
because I'm not a realtor?
Yeah.
But you would have a button here that says link account. And now you can link your account with from Rentsby to Zipforms. And now all of a sudden, when it says, okay, yes, now it'll create all those transactions in Rentsby as well for you to track, which is really super cool. So, but yeah, that's where you would do it here, which is great. But again, you also have a lot of other third-party tools. Hurdler is great for your accounting. This will track your mileage, your expenses, everything. If you start moving more than 5 miles an hour, this will all of a sudden start to clock mileage for you and ask you if it's a business expense, which is great for accounting. So create an account with that, and you should be able to download the app.
How does it work with Google Calendar and Google Contacts?
That would be with your,
But how, like, what is it? What features does it provide? Or
that's your tasks. So what happens is what I can then do is merge my Google Calendar. So when I create tasks, due dates that need to be done on my, for my transaction, instead of it just being on my Zipforms calendar, I can now automatically apply it to my other two
That's
calendars.
pretty cool.
So now, which is great for templates real quick. So if you have templates, you can now assign tasks like, oh, here are the tasks of anytime I go into escrow, based on the date of acceptance, I need to have inspections done. I need to have the disclosures to be able to be reviewed. So now you can set all these things up, and now you can have them automatically placed when you assign your transaction into, say, pending, and you put in a date of acceptance.
Can you show us? Is that okay?
Oh, yeah.
Can you show us
I
how to
think
do
it's
that?
very
How to
interesting.
create
Yeah,
a
it's-
task template?
Sure.
That's
So in your templates, what you can do is add tasks. We have things that we need to do once we go into escrow, right? So maybe I go into my purchase template, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a checklist. When I go to create a checklist, maybe I say create a checklist, and I'm going to call the task general inspection. Right now, I'm going to make it relative and required. When I say relative, I'm going to say typically, what do I always try to get my general home inspection done by?
First
17
week.
days,
First week.
5
First
days,
week.
7.
the first 5 days, right? First 5 days before or after, typically after date of acceptance, right? Or after offer acceptance date, okay? And then I can say, you know what, assign it to me, the selling agent, right? Because that's my responsibility. And then I can say save. So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to start adding in all these tasks. Maybe I do not only a general inspection, but what? A chance to review documents from the seller.
So there's, you're trying, how about the contingency periods? Because they could all be different.
Exactly. So, but all based on those contingencies, right? We've got a bunch of things. So my appraisal, my loan, I can put all these dates in or all these time frames in. Now, once I do that and you apply this template to a transaction, what then requires us to do is that when we go into that transaction and we change our status, say from active to pending, we get accepted, we go it like in the MLS, we go into our transactions in Zipforms and we change the status. Now in this summary, we have a purchase summary, one of which does say, or I'm sorry, where is that? Offer acceptance. Say we got our offer accepted on the 21st. Now when I leave this and it saves, we now should see under our task menu, dates added. So you'll now see here under my calendar, I've got certain dates. So the offer was accepted, and now all of a sudden I'm going to have dates that are going to have things that are required, the inspection and things like that. Now, if I had this merged onto my Google Calendar, these dates based on that template of the task will now be on my phone calendar, my tablet calendar, my computer calendar of reminding me when I need to get these things done. So it's a great automatic assistant that you can set up through your templates. So now you can put down everything that you need. Contingency removal by, 17 days after, acceptance. You can always change the dates to modify them on your calendar, but at least it's a default reminder, right? With our busy days the way they are, we can now get things automated for us very quickly and easily just by applying a template that has tasks. Does that make sense? Anybody like that?
Yeah.
Good. Good. Let's see here. Back to that
If
transaction.
it's just on here, but not on your Google calendars, will it email you a
No.
notification?
No, it won't.
Can you set it to email? From, or,
I think the notification section under your profile will notify you.
so you just have to go into that section every time you log into Zipforms to see what's coming up.
Exactly.
Okay.
So yeah, your task checklist sends you a notification 5 days before. So I guess it will email you. You just have to set it up. So email me anytime my checklists are coming up. But if you're automatically getting like 1,000 emails a day, which most of us do, you probably all over skip them, right? But
Not
if
on
it's on your phone, in your phone's calendar, you'll have push notifications, everything else that your calendar should be kicking off. And I'm hoping one day that Zipforms will have more calendars available. Let's see. What else? Oh, so back at that listing, lease listing transaction, if we add a form, and what was that form you were talking about, Carlos? The
LL? Lease listing agreement?
no, the disclosure form,
RPOD.
RPOD. Thank you. Right. Don't know why that disappeared all of a sudden. There it goes. All right. You'll notice in the RPOD that you as the agent aren't able to fill out these sections, right? Just like with the TDS, the SVQ, this is a responsibility of the rental property owner number one. Now,
You can say landlord, that's fine.
well, I don't want to offend anybody. I don't want to offend anyone, right? So we're going to add in a new party, and you'll see here that we've got landlord, not seller. So we've got landlord and tenant, because these people are the people that affect the lease contracts.
So we went back since Trump was elected.
Well, I would imagine. Yes, it does say landlord. So Carlos, you said the landlord needs to fill this one out, or the
Yes,
tenant
the
fills it?
landlord.
Landlord. So now with Richard here.
Don't put my name in there. Please. Carlos.
Wait, Carlos, when I had saved, even though he's not here, right? When I go to the tools section, when I go to sign this form, you're going to see that Richard will have the capability, because he's now the landlord, not seller one, to be able to fill out this form. So add from transaction.
So whatever color he's highlighted as, it's gonna show up on the,
And these will be optional areas, just like the TDS and the SBQ. So his yellow is now allowing him to fill in, or her, these sections. They just have to now be picked as landlord or tenant for the lease contract. Because those are the areas designated for this spot. And then one last thing, if I may.
Oh, please. Go ahead.
Now, this is setting it up for digital signatures. How many times has a client accidentally messed up on filling out a form, like the TDS? A couple of times, right? Well, instead of sending it out for signatures right away, and this is also key for making sure that the person is in the right slot for the right transaction, what I can now do is I can actually share access into this transaction with the clients to allow them to fill out the forms live time. So under the party section, so before I go into the form, this is where the party section comes into play. On that dark gray bar, if I select parties, there's a button at the top left that says share. When I click on share, and I'm now going to create a new share with, in this case, the landlord or housing provider, number one. And when I say done, what I now can do is I'm going to give him the capability of editing forms. And now when I say next, I now get to pick what form they can now modify and edit.
That's great.
Now, he won't be able to edit the entire form. So the sections that are designated only to me as the agent are locked. But the sections that number one can fill in are now able to be filled in. Now, what happens here is that because this is a lifetime edit, and by the way, I can hit save and send. A link goes out to Richard. He now goes through it. I give him a call and he goes through it and fills it out. I'm going to tell him to hit save. When he hits save, I'm going to refresh my screen, go back into the transaction, open up that form, and I can see all their changes to that form. He doesn't sign it, but he's just edited the form. Now, if I look at it and I go, oh, you filled out this correctly, or you missed this section or whatever, while he's still in it, he can make the changes, resave it again. I now exit the form, go back in and see the changes. Now, when we say, okay, everything's good, I will now send it out for signature.
So that's a live link. They can go back into it as many times.
As many times as they want. But that's why I also earlier give them a time frame of how long I give them the possibility of editing the form. So I give them a date to complete it. I'm not going to default to a month. I'm probably only going to give him like, what, 5 days, if that, to edit the form, probably just 2 or 3 days max. So this prevents them from going back in and changing their answers just willy-nilly. So at least I have some semblance of control. And what's nice is that now I've gone through the form with them. They've edited the form. Now I can set it out for signatures. And when I get the form signed back, it's fully ready to go and filled in correctly. Does that help?
So it's true of any form that the seller
Or-
landlord is required to complete.
Correct.
TDS, SPQ, things.
TDS, SPQ, ESD, the RPODs or whatever that are out there. Yes, sir.
Can I bother you to go back and then get to this point again?
Sure.
One more time.
Sure.
Good
To
question.
get to this section, just go into your transaction, right? So you're in the transaction, you view the summary. From here, what we're going to do is on the dark gray bar, go to parties. From here, we're going to now go to the top left and click on the share button. And now I'm just going to click to start sharing. And now I can select who I want to share the documents to. So if I had, landlord 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4 may not be able to edit the form because only one person can fill out the form at any given time. On those disclosures, whoever number 1 is, landlord 1 or seller 1, have the power to fill out that form or those forms. So it's really going to be vital who wants to be number 1 to have that responsibility, especially in a trust.
Yeah, so instead of just sending the form out and having them fill it out electronically, share it so we can review it. And then we get a
send it.
complete, accurate document.
Correct.
That's great.
It's way better than say you fill out the TDS and you noticed Carlos filled out that he has a water heater, but he didn't indicate if it was gas, electric, or solar. Now I got to resend it technically again for him to fix it, which now does what? If I had missed it and I sent it, now I've modified it, which now gives the buyer 5 extra days
Yes.
to review the TDS because it's been modified. At least if I do it this way, we get it filled out correctly the first time. Then I send it out for signatures. Now, when I submit it, I will have very little to no modifications.
That's great.
Anybody like any of this?
Oh, yeah.
Good. Any questions on any of this?
Why didn't you show this to us earlier? That's the question.
Teacher?
I'm gonna give myself some credit. That's why I asked him to come over to Zipforms again, because there's so many facets.
There's so many facets, right? Like the advantage of being a listing agent is that in Zipforms, there is a button in your transaction as well. So back here on the summary, there's a button here called email to transaction. What I can now do is I have now a personalized email link that I can share with anyone. And if they email to this email address, they're basically sending documents directly into this transaction in a folder. So if I wanted to, instead of using Glide that's on the MLS, if I was an agent and I didn't want to use Glide whatsoever, I can now have that link and put it in my private remarks and just say, email all documents to this email. Now, any agent, or I put it on a sign writer, maybe on the leasing side, or that QR code. So when they click on it, it's an immediate email that they can now email documents that will now sit in this transaction ready for me to review and go over with my clients, which is really super nice.
Can you set it to CCU?
I'm actually notified by Zipforms that someone has emailed something to my document.
Okay.
So it's a quick email notification if I have that set up in my profile. Whenever something happens, I'm emailed and notified about it. Now it'll prompt me to go into the transaction, look at the folder that says inbox or whatever the title is, and I'll see the person's email correspondence as an attachment and the documents as separate attachments.
Or if someone emails you an offer, you could just forward it to that link,
Yeah.
that email.
Which is great.
Yeah.
Email your offers to this email address. And it's unique for each and every individual transaction. But it's only on the listing side, not the buying side. Any other questions?
Wow.
Wow.
We're gonna have to go over this again.
Yeah,
I'm thinking,
we're ending out the year strong. I think we have one more class in December.
okay, we might do a repeat of some of these things to emphasize these certain aspects. I think this is fantastic in regards to sharing
Yes.
those documents and getting it done right the first time.
Yeah, I like that a lot. The share saves a lot of time and effort. And say I don't want to give anybody access to edit the file, I could actually give the other agent on the other side access to download and print the files from my transaction. So on the listing side, you've got what, 40 or 50 disclosures? Now, instead of creating multiple emails where you're attaching all those disclosures, go to share and then just send a share to the agent that's part of your transaction. Now they have a link with all the documents. Now they can download them, upload them into their own transaction, get their clients to sign it, and then encourage them to reshare it back to you. Now you can get all those documents in one small link.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if you send a link, that's considered delivery if you have a designated email address. So you don't have to actually send those out for delivery. So the law states if you send a link with access to those documents, now you have effectively delivered all those documents.
Yeah, which is huge.
It's huge in the transaction.
Unless they give you something in writing that says, I don't want
Yeah,
a
they
link.
don't want it that way, but most people aren't smart enough to know that.
Yeah.
So there's a question.
Yes. Question is what do you use List Flash for? List Flash. That's your elite agent section. This is I guess now a paid service again. It used to be free last year, but what this allows listing agents to do is to advertise their listing up for market to every agent that's part of Zipforms. So any agent that has access to Zipforms, and we're talking 250,000 agents across California, will now get a little lightning bolt in their Zipforms account that indicates that there's a property up for sale or up for lease. Now, with their added bonus for that amount, there's a choice that says Elite Agent Offers. This now allows you as the buying agent or the tenant agent side to submit your offer directly into their transaction through that portal, which is really great. I think it's like $250 a year for this service, or it used to be. So it's a great way of advertising. Your listing's up for sale. Just put it on List Flash and all of a sudden, boom, your listing now goes out to every agent. They can go under where is it? I think it's the List Flash button under their dashboard. Or actually under Elite Agent, they can go to List Flash. And now all of a sudden I can put in a zip code and see within like so many miles, say like, oh, I don't know, 25 miles. There are at least 5,000 listings, and let's put in 92618 zip code. Come on. Sorry, we couldn't find any resulting, oh, that's because agents don't do that, but I could add my listing, advertise it, and just get it out there. It's a great tool, because Zipforms wants to try to be an all-in-one portal. But I figured, why limit yourself to just MLS advertisement to 91,000 agents? Now, all of a sudden, you've got advertisement to 250,000 agents. Yeah, everybody with Zipforms. Which is kind of cool. Now, all of a sudden,
I have one more question.
yes, sir.
Back to party.
Yes. Let's see, transactions. Parties.
I want to add my partner, we're both, I've written an offer, I'm gonna add her to it. There's a buyer's agent, but there's only one.
Right, because usually there's only one in charge, but what I could do is go to add other
I got that. Yeah,
and then
that's how-
say,
That's how I do it. But
Yeah.
I'm just saying, then it doesn't auto-populate.
right, because the contracts only have spot for number one.
There's no way they can change that?
No,
That's just,
but you have, they could,
I mean, come on.
they could. I mean, that's something that you'll have to bring up the CARs. I'm sorry. My nervous habit.
Well, you have the additional agent
You
acknowledgement.
have the
Addendum.
AAA, the additional agent addendum, which allows that agent to be added. But if you're talking about, I want it on the listing agreement and the purchase agreement, a spot for two agents. That's something that the forms committee would have to decide on. I don't know why they haven't done that, other than if they do that, that's probably gonna increase the size of every contract by an extra page.
Well, it's just a specific, there's only a couple of times you'd actually need that on that form to actually auto-populate. So
Right,
I
but
would-
when
I
you
would
have,
expect it to do the entire form, just those couple.
but when you have hard language in a form, like the purchase agreement. And now all of a sudden you've got to now make room for a secondary agent in that form, that which now increases it, substantially, to have almost the same mirrored language, whether they're at the same brokerage or not, right? Which now increases just the contract,
But
which,
there is a line for additional agent. I mean, the first contract, I'm very, I forget the page, 15, 16. There are two lines for two people.
under the additional agent,
No, yeah, it shows that there's two, and you can add another
Yeah.
agent there.
but in the top, there's always the primary.
Yeah, no,
There's always the primary.
Because you'd
We
have to
can-
have
we
a
can
second
talk. I mean,
broker.
you can send me an
Also.
email, I'll present it to CAR and they can maybe get it over to forms committee. I mean, it can be. I mean, nowadays, more and more people are working on teams, right? I think we've kind of migrated from the individual agent mostly to a team mentality, especially everybody here in Coldwell knows that they can all work together, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to be on an official team necessarily, but
Right.
you can work out those things between each other.
Well, they would have to change that whole agency section where it says that what brokerage represents the seller and what agent, and then they'd have to add another one, right?
Right, for both.
Yeah.
Because there may
If
be
it's
a-
a different brokerage.
Right. Or there's a button that I think indicates there may be the same brokerage.
Yeah.
And there's even another choice for if they're working at different brokerages. So, yeah, lots of fun stuff that all of a sudden now increase the contracts that you
And
can
then
do
I'm
that.
sure there's gonna, when you add that, there's gonna be more pages added to the contract.
You're right.
That Because there's a disclosures and those things.
You
All
got
because of
27
Steve.
pages now.
More than merrier.
Well, you got 27 pages now, pretty soon, probably a little bit more, depending on what addendums and advisories you need to add. And heaven forbid you get really wordy and all of a sudden you got text overflow addendums going on. So before you know it, you got a nice small stack of contracts that somebody's got to sign and go over. So, I mean, it's up to y'all. I mean, I'm all for more contracts. Are there any other questions?
No other questions,
All
Hardway.
right, all
Tony,
right.
thank you. That was great.
Thank you.
Well, I'm very happy with that presentation.
Yes. Okay.
Yes, that was very helpful, as a matter of fact. So has anybody not turned their cards in today that's here? You, okay, all right.
She's the troublemaker.
Are you photographing this?
She was named.
Put it in there yourself.
You think she's gonna win again?
She's gonna win again? All right, Sarah, did you turn your card in?
Oh,
You want to,
oh, you want me to pick?
yes, he wants it to be fair.
That's why she's videotaping. Excellent.